Yeah, everybody, welcome again to eChannel News. We've got Jonathan Lacour. He's the CTO of a company called Mission Cloud. And you know what we're talking about today? AI. But you know what we'll be talking really about today is AI and what really matters. So welcome, Jonathan. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing very well. Good to see you, Julian.
Good stuff. Nice to meet you again. I'm seeing some like what those are those iPods on your shelf
Yeah,
there?
I have an original iPod, and then I've got some little fun toys and stuff here. I'm a little bit of a collector of vintage things, far
Yeah.
more keyboards than any human being should have, and
Yeah,
all
I got
sorts
a
of
few
fun
of
stuff.
those too, man. That's you know what I'll tell you? The darn thing still actually works,
Yeah,
which is weird,
yeah, it's
to say the
awesome.
least. Anyways, let's move on. So AI. I'm just gonna first of all, Jonathan, give us a bit of a background, your journey, how you got to
Sure.
Mission. I won't almost said Mission Control, Mission Cloud, and what do you guys do over at Mission Cloud?
Great question. So, backgrounder on me, kind of came up through software development. Started writing code at a medical software company back when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
So I've been in the business for quite some time. I'm a lot older than 15, and finally starting to look it with the gray in my beard. And since that time, I've done startups. I've worked in infrastructure and hosting. Have done cloud storage products and services. And that's how I ended up at Mission Cloud. So Mission Cloud is a AWS Premier Consulting Partner and managed service provider. So we help customers with all things AWS, from sort of cost optimization to AI projects, support, monitoring, and everything in between.
Cool stuff. I mean, look, AI is the buzzword of obviously of 2023, right? And it's like, AI was not invented in 2023, right?
Right.
Companies been doing this now for a long, long time. But hey, the world awoke to generative AI, right? Which is a whole different
Yes.
flavor of the game, right? And we're all seeing a lot of user cases. There's a lot of confusion. It seems like every organization out there, whatever comes out of their mouth, there's a little AI, that comes out with it. And so it seems like everybody is in this game, right? And little AI for you, AI for you. You got AI, everybody's got AI. Um, give us your take on this AI. Just clicking it back, when it was announced, right? Was it surprising to you? Is it? What was your take on it?
So it's really interesting. As I said, I've been in this space for quite some time, and machine learning has been around for quite some time. And ultimately, when Gen AI, the concept, started to become really a booming, idea, was with what? ChatGPT, right?
Mhm.
And it was a very tactile thing, right? A human being could go and enter stuff into a box and get an AI generated response. And that is new. So that's thing number one that happened, is there was an interface on top of machine learning models, which before, if you wanted to interact with machine learning models, you pretty much had to, install Python and, use a whole bunch of command line tools. And it was a very high barrier to entry. So ChatGPT is sort of this interesting toy that got everyone excited about what Gen AI could do. And the second thing was these foundation models. So foundation models are sort of the underpinning machine learning models that we're talking about when we talk about Gen AI. These foundation models are trained on massive data sets. And so in the past, this wasn't something that was really achievable, but we reached a stage now where it's possible to train these models on just huge corpuses of data. I'm talking like the entire, internet type scope of data,
Everything.
right? Everything that these companies were able to consume. And that's obviously one of the big challenges, is sort of like licensing of content and copyright, and have they trained it on the right things. But we can talk about that later. I think ultimately it's just understanding machine learning is not new, AI is not new. Gen AI has become a thought and a hot property now because of ChatGPT making it real for people, and the foundation models, the underlying models that we have available today, along with the speed of compute and kind of all of that, taking us to this whole new level of what's possible. So that's sort of where the hype comes from.
The era of AI. We're entering
That's
this
right.
new thing. It was really cool because just recently, I think right now that in the UK there's this conference on AI and privacy laws and misuse and how do we put some guardrails up in AI. I
Yep.
think Elon Musk is over there chatting with the Prime Minister of of England, of London, of Britain, and they're talking about all the things they're doing to sort of put up the guardrails and what they
Yep.
can't do. And from one way, everybody can have their own personalized tutor to make you get A++ across all the your educational thing, which is kind of cool. I wish if I had that, back in the day. And the other thing, it's going to do wonders for education, but also for medical and all that stuff. And then, oh boy, could be a lot of stuff with social engineering, with influencing,
Yeah.
various elections, and you just go down the gamut. And it's kind of interesting because I heard Elon say for the first time, it's like, man, it could be like 80% good, 20% bad. And I never heard a number. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that the 80-20 rule was designed to be applied like this. But yeah, I mean, there's good and there's bad out of AI, right? And we're not here to figure out, how that's all going to play out. But when a company and an MSP, right, is looking at AI with their customers and themselves, right? How do they, leverage AI? What does their customers should do, not do? It's like, for me, it's not AI to be feared. It's the humans who know how to use AI. I'm worried about them.
Or the humans that don't know how to use it and then put it to use anyway,
Oh,
right? And
well,
that's a huge challenge as well.
you're talking Armageddon, man. So don't let's go there. But yeah, so what's your take? So you're an MSP, right? And your customers are there going, man, I got Copilot, I got this, different ones coming from Google, and I've got these ones from whatever. And what do I do? Right?
Yeah.
How should they approach AI?
We get that question a lot, right? And we get it from our managed services customers and our professional services customers as well. People come to us because we're trusted kind of advisor to them, and they say, hey, AI is obviously becoming this transformational technology. How can I apply it to my business? And I think the advice I always give to our customers is we can start with things that can make it real for you, right? And you mentioned a couple of prepackaged products that are powered by Gen AI under the hood, right? And so as an AWS partner, we help customers implement things like Code Whisperer, right? Which is, AWS's answer to Copilot. It's trained on their massive source code repositories and so on. And this is a great way for any business to start dabbling and say like, okay, this is a productivity use case, right? I'm going to automatically generate code on behalf of my developers. They can use it as a tool to help them be more efficient. And you can measure it. It's real. It is tactical. It's a thing that you can actually measure today and say, hey, I'm using AI now in my business. What is the result of that? So that is if you are a business that has an engineering team, a team of people who are writing code, which I think these days, many, if not most businesses have that. Another way they can do this is they can actually take advantage of things like QuickSight Q, right? And so Amazon has this pretty powerful platform for data analytics in general. And QuickSight is a visualization platform where you can go and you can build reports and you can slice and dice your data in your data lakes and so on. And they've actually integrated Gen AI into the platform. So you can have conversational design with QuickSight and say like, show me a report for my sales in North America in 2020, right? Okay, now trend that, forward 10 years. And it can do these things in an automated fashion. And so I think people often make the mistake of, okay, now I have to go build out, if I'm going to take advantage of AI, I have to go out and build my own models, right? And number one, good luck training a foundation model, right? You're going to have massive amounts of money and effort you have to spend there. That's why there's not many foundation models.
I think that train has left the building already. But
right.
anyways,
yeah, exactly. It's better to be a consumer, right? And then a tuner and move on there, or be a user, right? And so you sort of move to the left, right? So you start with, I'm going to use prepackaged products, start testing the waters. Then you start thinking about like, okay, what about my data estate? What do I have available to me that could be empowered by a Gen AI model, right? And you kind of layer down from there. So one other thing I'll interject before we get to the next question is, interestingly, when I had this background in healthcare, like I mentioned, Healthcare is not known to be the sort of highly forward-thinking, first to hit a technology type industry, right? It's just not viewed that way, and for good reason, right? A lot of times these hospital systems are aging. It's difficult, that's not their primary, kind of function and motivation. But when it comes to Gen AI, some of the businesses that are in the best position, the organizations that are in the best position to start leveraging Gen AI are ones that have extremely well constructed, secured, and tagged data lakes, right? Who have their data in a very good position. Who is going to be the most likely to do that? Highly regulated industries. So it sort of flipped things on its head right now. Like, businesses that have massive amounts of data in a structured format that is, pretty easy for them to, keep secure. They've got all these systems in place. They're in a good position to start leveraging Gen AI.
It's like, of course, we know the gold is in the data, right? I mean, everybody talks about the new gold and all that stuff, right? And sometimes it's just, what the hell is in the data, right? How do we use that information in a smart way, right? I mean, that's probably the biggest question that everybody's trying to figure out, right? So if you're lucky enough to have it structured and lucky enough to have enough of it, and you push this into an AI model, right? What are some of the outcomes that these companies sort of expect?
Great question. So I think starting from use cases is often a great, idea. So you've gone through the packaged kind of products, you put yourself, through the motion of understanding how they work. Now you can start thinking about what are use cases I can actually solve with Gen AI. And so there's a variety of different use cases. Mission has done something on the order of 20, 30 projects now, most of which are in production across 7 or 8 primary use cases. So some of the things are data augmentation, right? And so generating new data sets that can then be used for other activities. So for example, fraud detection, that's a great use case. So intelligent document processing, IDP, you can actually generate synthetic fraudulent documents, helping to train your models to detect patterns about what fraudulent documents might look like, right? So you can do better, fraud detection. Text summarization is obviously a big use case as well. Very common to say, I have this mountain of data. I need to get a concise kind of abstract of these documents so that I can quickly analyze them and pull out what is important to me. And that can be hundreds of thousands of documents being summarized down to 2-pager. It can even be single documents summarized down to 5 or 6 sentences. And so that's another kind of case that I think people can look at. Then there's all the generation cases, right? So if you're a business that has a lot of content that you publish, that is an opportunity for you. So for example, if you're generating personalized newsletters or marketing materials, this is a great place for you to be able to take personalization data and feed that into a generative AI platform and create some pretty valuable and good content. Obviously, there's a lot of sensitivity around this right now because people are like, I'm going to lose my job. I'm a content creator. It's like, no, you're going to be able to create content for 1,000 customers instead of 10 customers. It's the same as a developer using Code Whisperer to help them be more productive, right?
Unless, of course, Jonathan, you're working for the company and there's only so much content you create, and you're outsourcing your job. But you're right. Yeah.
The people who embrace this are the ones who are going to come out on top, right?
For sure.
At the end of the day, like, you can dig your heels in and say, this, I don't want this to take my job. Or you can say, how can I do my job better? Right.
For sure. I mean, we're not at that choice level yet. I don't think it's a choice anymore. The cat's out of the bag, and you got to race for it. But let's continue. What are some of the other user cases that you guys are hitting on?
So maybe we should talk about some actual case studies, because I think that is pretty helpful. So most of these I will keep the names out because it's not really the most important aspect of it, and sometimes we don't have permission to do that. But so there is a use case that I really enjoy actually around kind of documentaries. Okay, so we have a customer who has thousands of hours of documentary footage in English. Okay, and they wanted to go global. They want to take their content and they want to go worldwide with it. The problem is translation is prohibitively expensive, especially when you're doing closed captioning, right? Because you have to make sure that the words can fit in the rhythm and timing on the screen of what's actually going on, in the film. And that is
Mhm.
actually turns out to be an extremely difficult problem. And the way that this has been solved in the past is human beings going in and writing down on a frame by frame basis the words and the translations by language. This is a very expensive process. So the company had looked at doing this in the traditional way and said, this is impossible. We cannot go to market in other languages with our content. It's just it is so expensive that the return on investment wouldn't be there. So what they did is they worked with us, and we went through and we used transcription, and we used large language model Titan from Amazon, and we're actually translating the English into different languages, right? And so German is one of the initial languages that we've rolled out with, and then we're looking at the German translations and saying, is this too big to fit in frame? Okay, can you go summarize this model? And the model will summarize that line and shrink it down in order to fit in the cadence and of the content. It will work on things like idioms and profanity and kind of work around those use cases. And it's a pretty incredible thing because this is something that was not possible at all. They could not do this. And now we're able to do this at 99% cost less
Mm.
than the traditional way. And now this has enabled them to go global, not just in one new language, but potentially in 5, 6, 7, 8 new languages. So it's a pretty powerful use case.
Totally. I mean, that's how Mr. Beast up there his subscriptions, right? He translated his content into multiple languages. I mean,
Yep.
we sometimes think that everybody just speaks English around the world, and we only cater to that industry, that sector, right? But putting your content in multiple languages is a kind of a no-brainer. As a matter of fact, last couple of weeks ago, we were at one of our events, and Shane Gibson had a little clip. I will share it on eChannel News later on. But anyways, he comes out and he's talking in English as so I'm a salesperson, and here's my product, fictitious type of pitch. And then he switches it into German. And kind of a deep fake type thing, but it was pretty darn close. And his voice was his voice. And then he switched that into Mandarin and he turned it into Spanish. And I was like, wow, okay, so I get it, right? This is the way we can take content and then slice and dice it into multiple languages. So that's going to be a huge user case, and for sure. Are there things that obviously video is great,
Yep.
but also text, copy, right? All these things are part of the game too. Even writing articles for blogs and so on, right? Are you seeing that's the gold rush right now?
So I think, interestingly enough, I think I always look at places where, look, efficiency is good, right? And so if you're like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to create more articles with less time, that can be valuable, right? But I think to a degree, it's also important to generate better content, right? That is more targeted. And so another good customer example is we're working with a real estate kind of agent focused business, right? And so they help their their agents engage with their customers, and they want to do it in a personalized way. So we're building out with them something that pulls data from the MLS, real estate stories, in any customer profile information they know about what this customer is looking for. So are they looking for a 3-bedroom? Are they looking for a 4-bedroom? Do they want a pool? All of these aspects. And then they can do transfer learning on a monthly basis, and they send out these customized, personalized newsletters that are generated by AI, but they're very targeted to that individual person. And it can tell them, here are 10 homes that we've identified that align with what you want, right? And here's some content around it summarizing. And so if you've identified, I want a pool and I want a 3-bedroom house, we can make sure that that machine learning model, the Gen AI, is producing something that highlights the fact that this particular property has the number of bedrooms they're looking for and a pool, right? So, it's not just generating more content or generating content more efficiently. It's also generating better content.
Yeah. Just make sure the interest rates is hidden. So you want to buy that thing. That's another great user cases. Keep going, man. What are some of the other things you guys are playing with?
So you talked about summarization a little bit and text. So reducing copy is actually just as important as generating it, right? And so we've helped actually quite a few kind of growth equity, private equity firms they track, hundreds of thousands of companies worldwide, and it's often difficult for them to surface the ones that they need to track, right, on a more specific basis, right, really drill in. And so they want to look for these diamonds in the rough. And so they have all these analysts that are tracking thousands of companies at any given time. So we built out an NLP kind of ML infrastructure and background to generate summaries about companies that they're tracking, and to do summary updates about here's what's changed since last time you checked in.
Right.
And then we can generate scores that say, okay, this company has now reached a threshold where we can actually alert the analyst to go in and dig deeper, right? And perhaps extend the summarization out, instead of getting a paragraph, getting a 3-pager, right? And so surfacing insights, it's starting to become a little bit more like a conversational search engine, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's actually a really powerful use case as well, summarization.
It's amazing because there's no shortage of content right out there, and sometimes it's just heavy, to kind of
Yeah.
like go and digest all that stuff. It seems like you got to read a book every hour or something just to keep ahead of the flow. And but then there's professions, right? That is the legal profession is one of those. Writing contracts,
Yep.
getting a contract and figuring out what's in there. There's a lot of these other things that's coming to the forefront, if you will.
Yep.
It's people are realizing that there's a lot of little nuances, right, within this stuff, and sometimes you overlook those things,
Yeah.
because you're scanning the stuff, you're reading as fast as you can, but if you got someone to summarize and highlight the things that is critical. Are you finding that when people start to use that summary type feature, do you think they're really getting the gist of it, or is the AI sort of like leaving things out, or how
I
accurate
think
are we?
you're bringing up a good point, right? Which is that Gen AI models, they're designed to give you the next best word, right? And
Right.
so whatever you give them, all they're doing is generating the next best word, right? Based upon, now it is done in a way that it's not the same. Like every time you go ask the same question, you're going to get a new answer.
Yeah.
It is not that kind of algorithm. I can
Yeah.
go into more depth about this, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so uh, models are happy to give you confident wrong answers.
Yeah.
Just they love to do it. These are called hallucinations. You may have heard of that notion with Gen AI. And so, look, it's not this panacea where you can assume everything that's going to be coming out of the model is accurate necessarily, right? There are ways that you can ensure that. There are guardrails you can put in place. But it is an important note that these things are not oracles, right? That's
Yeah.
not what they're there for. They are good at giving you the next best word. So treat it almost like you would treat a human in many respects, right? Whereas if you talk to a human and you ask them a question, you're going to get an answer from them, but can you be sure that that answer is correct? How do you go about, assessing the accuracy of that information? And, if you're generating massive amounts of text, reviewing that is, can be onerous, but it could actually be, maybe spot checking. It can be worth it, right? Because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, you cannot guarantee that these things are going to be accurate. So you have to have something in place to make
Yeah.
sure that.
That's why I brought it up. I mean, it's it's I mean, it's really cool to believe it's like the Oracle, the all-knowing Oracle, like Matrix type stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that take it with a pinch of salt, right? And double check and quadruple check, especially when the risk potential is critical. So don't
Yep.
just throw stuff in there and take whatever comes back out as face value, right?
Right.
And another caution as well, I guess, and you can talk a bit about this as well. You got to be careful how much information and what kinds of information you're pumping into
Yes.
the system, right? And
Big time.
if it's not closed off, right, it's open up. And and so talk a bit about that. I mean, do we just pump everything in there?
See, I think that to me is probably the most important nuance that every user of these systems needs to understand. Um, a foundation model is powerful because of the content that is fed into it from the beginning, right? That is how it is trained. And the more information that these models get, the more effective they can become. So where does the incentive lie for a model provider, right? When you're interacting with them, their incentive lies with getting more of your information, right? Now they have terms of service, they have all of these things where they say we will not share your data and all this good stuff,
Sure.
which is fair, right? And I'm glad that they have that. But at the same time, you have to treat your data as sensitive, right? Where it is. And so one of the things that, we've done at Mission, and we've advised other customers on how to do this as well, is you got to create a policy, right? You have to have an understanding of, look, if you're going to be using an AI model, right, where are you getting that data from? If it's proprietary data, it cannot leave, right, the scope of our environment. And that's where places like Amazon Web Services help them out, right? Because if all their data is already, in S3 buckets, and they've got all the permissions set appropriately, and they have access managed in a careful way, you can use a system like Bedrock to go and, within the boundaries of your existing security model, still do Gen AI within the scope of your VPC, right? Of your own environment. But what we see all too often is people going to ChatGPT and pasting proprietary business information into ChatGPT. And that is just not okay. You should not be doing that, right? Because at the end of the day, yeah, if that data ends up, a lot of times I hear people say, well, nobody's going to get that information. Like, how are they going to get it? Ask. The model is more than happy to give you confident answers about anything that it is aware of. And so if it has seen you say Mission Cloud's strategic plan for 2024 includes, expanding our services to the moon, someone could say, is Mission Cloud going to the moon? And the model could say, yes, in fact, they're planning on doing it in 2024, right? So, I'm using kind of out there, examples here,
Sure.
whether or not that would actually happen, but you get the idea, right? You have to treat it with appropriate level of caution and care.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that when you pump something into these systems, right, it's in there. And I don't think, do you believe that they're really have these guardrails up that this data is inaccessible, permanently? I mean, yeah, I would believe that, in the next 30 years when it proves out to be true. And I understand everybody's trying to put guardrails up around what they're doing, and I get it. And I know you can actually spin up solutions that is just within your world, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't go out into the wild, if you will, the AI wild. But in reality, is what you put in is critical, and what you get out is also critical. Mm-hmm. So you got to look at both of those inputs and outputs with a very, very critical eye. And I don't know if anybody's figured it out yet or put some quantitative things around it, right? How much crazy stuff is coming out, or I just put all my IP address, and my IP stuff, into this stuff, and I just want to know if I've, if it makes sense or whatever. Or, these things are not. I'm assuming it's not really. You don't want to do that because the outcomes could be really, really bad, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, look, at the end of the day, this is, as a CTO, as a technologist, I am constantly having to evaluate the trustworthiness of vendors, right? That is partly what your job is to say, if I'm going to partner with this vendor, if I'm going to work with this business, I need to know what their policies are. I need to know that they actually follow them. And I need some level of assurance that I can trust them. So what I would say is, there's actually, if you look at the providers out there today, there is a lot of information about how they behave, how they interact with people who ask them questions about their data, what assurances and policies they have in place, and just use a critical eye, right? Like, if you are working with a model provider that is associated with, say, Meta and Facebook, right? Okay, what do we know about that business, right? What do we know about how they've treated users' data in the past? How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel about working with their AI model? Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't work with that model. What I'm saying is you should be asking these questions and say, for the use case, what's the right thing here? And I think that it's also important for us as consumers of these, models, to hold them accountable, right, for doing what we expect. And you actually saw, I think last week, President Biden did a big executive order on AI. And it was really interesting to me because I think there's lots of good things in there around how the government can and cannot use AI and what approvals they need and so on and so forth. one of the things that I thought was just absolutely missing was any sort of notion around holding model providers accountable for training on copyrighted content versus, do they really have permission to be using this content to train with? So it's a bit of the Wild West right now when it comes to that. And I think a lot of this is going to be decided in the courts, because the model providers are going to argue they're doing nothing other than what a search engine does. And Google searches all day, every day, and crawls the web, and it's including content that they're not licensed to, use to generate things necessarily, but they are creating a product that is walking all sorts of data that you can search that maybe they don't have permission to distribute. So what does that mean? Are they right? Is that what they're doing? Is an AI model the same as a search engine?
Well, Jonathan, the pushback's already starting to happen, right?
Yeah.
Some news media organizations saying, no, you can't suck up my data and put it in. And if you do, send me a check. All right.
That's right.
And so the response is, well, we're gonna cut off your news feed into that organization, which means you don't get as much views and all that stuff. So you take a hit in your website. So there's always this push, pull, shoving around, right? Yeah. That's happening. At the end of the day, if we do let it just go crazy, right, then what's the point of copyright content?
Yeah.
Right. Let's say I'm doing an article and I'm pulling copyright stuff from a book or someone else's art. Like, how does that play in? Because maybe these language models took information from, some publication and brought it in. And I don't even know that, right? This thing has probably been done in Australia, and I'm doing an article in Wyoming, and it take this information and pull it together. And then down the road, somebody searches for it and goes, hey, wait a minute, I wrote that word for word or whatever. Yeah. Right. And that's how the plagiarism happens, and and all that stuff happens. Who is responsible for that? Like, what do I do?
Great question. So you'll actually see that some of these model providers have actually created indemnification clauses.
Yeah.
Right? And said, we will indemnify you against any sort of claim in that regard. And so I think on the plus side, that's a wonderful protection for a consumer, right? To know that you are safe against that risk. On the other hand, what does that say about that provider? They're saying, I'm going to indemnify you against this because I may know that I have already, consumed a bunch of copyrighted data, and I'm willing to take that risk because, I want to have the best model and I want to win the most customers and blah, 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 blah. So,
but what's the recourse of the person with a copyright?
Right.
So that companies can't be like, I'm a big bad wolf.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be able to get to me, so I'll protect you type attitude, right?
So this is, I think, an area where there will be pretty rapidly, I think the industry is going to have to come to some places where we can all create some comfort level around how do we incentivize properly the right behaviors? How do we make sure that we give artists and creators and people whose data is consumed by these models, how do we give them credit and attribution? Can they opt in? Can they opt out? Can we pay them if part of their content is used to generate something, right?
Yeah.
So there is a world in which we can get to a much better place, but it is, again, it's a bit of the Wild West, not because the technology necessarily is all that new, right? This is built on decades of machine learning, but the way that we now interact with these things and the data that they consume and how they can, do actually generate artwork, for example, is a new thing. And understanding, like, okay, if I say, draw me a painting or draw me a picture of Julian in the style of Norman Rockwell, right? Do I owe Norman Rockwell something for that? Right? I don't know. So there's
a big question, but there's precedence for this, right? Spotify, right? Yeah. People have figured out this model already, right? But I will tell you, if I took Norman Rockwell, painting, and I say, let me suck this into, I don't know, Mid-Journey or something, right? Yeah. And give me, let's say I'm on a mountain and I want to adjust it with this color with a bluish tint, right? And it changes it. Well, maybe I'm infringing on a platform, right? Yep. So I don't know, man. That's a bigger topic for way above my pay grade. But I'll watch
this is going to be decided over the next period of time in the courts through like there's going to be sometimes often technology outpaces the ability to regulate it
Yeah.
and so what's going to happen is people are going to test the waters. They're going to and I do think that I personally, take great care in paying attention to what these vendors do. And I appreciate that they're trying to push the boundaries of technology. At the same time, I think there's a better way than just doing something and sort of asking for forgiveness, right? Versus asking for permission. And I think there's certain ways that they can do a much better job of respecting the fact that they're entering sort of uncharted territory, and it would be much better if we were drawing the maps together than them saying, this is what the map looks like, get on board the ship, right? Like that's not fair. So it's going to be
Yeah,
interesting.
and I think as well the end person using this content, right? If they like the content, I mean, you're doing an article, right? And this paragraph is coming from somebody else, right?
Yep.
And I don't know, maybe there's a yes, no button that says, 25 cents, right? Goes to the author of this, click yes, no.
Yeah.
No, it deletes it. Yes, it sends a check to them for 25 cents. I'm dreaming in technicolor here, but no, some way that if I do use your content, there is some sort of a payment or acknowledgement, maybe. And the person could say either you pay me or you acknowledge me, right? We do this quite often in the news media business, right? That there is some sort of like structure, because I just believe that if everybody uses everybody's content with no recourse, right? That's just a whole game that
Yep.
I think where the rules no longer apply. And then we might as well do whatever, right? Let's go crazier and see
Right.
where we go. So I hope they're I hope they're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I think there is certainly, I don't think there's enough adults in the room when it
Yeah,
comes to innovating in this category, but there are adults in the room. So I will say
yeah.
that. So again, like not to harp on Amazon, but as an Amazon partner, I'm very close with them and understanding their view of AI and kind of how they're approaching it. And security, privacy, respect for attribution and things of this nature are all part of their strategic kind of core view on what AI should look like. And it's
Mm.
really interesting to me because that aligns very well with sort of my view. And so again, it all comes down to are they having the right conversations with the right people? Are they taking the appropriate steps to put systems in place to make this work well? And I think Amazon's actually done a pretty good job about that, and being one of the adults in the room.
It makes some obvious sense because even in Amazon, the e-commerce platform, right? Um, you know, I don't think they want to sell fake Chanel purses or
Oh,
that type of stuff, right? So they understand fundamentally the difference between stealing stuff that's not your own, right?
yeah.
You won't want to have anybody putting a logo from someone else on something that is not theirs, right? So dot to be continued, and
Yes.
but before we go, give me, you have another user case of where you're seeing you're getting really good traction, and maybe where you see the conversation is going to go in the near future.
Sure. So actually, interestingly, you brought up sort of the legal space, right? That is a very text heavy kind of vertical, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
text that goes on. They're doing not only producing lots of text, but they're also consuming a lot of text as well in order to do analysis and research and so on. So a customer we've worked actually is in sort of the class action lawsuit space, and specifically in sort of medical records and understanding, looking for class action suits. So they'll have this, kind of concept and say, I need to get as many people into the class as possible. How do I do that? Well, we've built out, kind of a machine learning based, use case for them, doing natural language processing using SageMaker on AWS and machine learning to basically allow them to identify quickly, through this document, data repository. Hey, how can I get a summarization of, people who should be involved in this class, right? That pattern match with what the class is the lawsuit's about. So that's actually another example of an entire field which has not typically been, viewed as sort of embracing the cutting edge, but they're getting great value out of it already, right?
And
So
the workload for humans, right? To go there and do that, right? We've seen the movies, right? It's a lot
yeah,
of work. And
massive.
yeah, and I think that's another amazing case. It seems to me, Jonathan, it's like your imagination is the only limitation. And if you dig a little bit deeper, you can find a way to, inject a little bit of AI to help save the case. Are you seeing any pushback from companies saying, no, man, I don't want to go down this AI, route? Are you seeing that at all?
I'll be honest with you, a lot less than I anticipated in many, many respects. I think there's just such a high degree of excitement. What I do see more than I want to see is businesses saying, I need to have AI in my, platform somehow, without starting from the first principle of what value am I creating here? What am I trying to do?
Get me
Um,
up faster.
yeah, what's the use case what are you trying to accomplish with AI? And that's where you should start, right? Is, am I looking to create more personalization? Am I looking to generate more content of higher quality? Am I looking to summarize something? Like, what is my goal? What am I trying to achieve? Is it profit? Is it, customer acquisition? Is it efficiencies? Like, what are you trying to do? Start from there, right? And then say, what can I buy? What can I build, right? Where do I end up? And that's something we spend a lot of time working with companies on. Is they'll come to us if, and I would say most of our customers don't come to us with this high level, we need an AI strategy. They come to us with actual, like, hey, I have this problem, I think AI might be able to help me with it. And then we have a conversation about solving it. And I think that's what I would encourage the world to think about going forward, is less about like the hype and the sort of like, what is the world going to look like in 20 years here? Like, we're going to figure that out together. What's important now is finding real use cases, getting down to brass tacks, just like I did with you, going through these customer cases. This is a real case. This is doing something practical. It's unlocking something for this business that they could not do before. And that's really the heart of all of this, is getting past the hype, getting down to brass tacks, looking at real problems to solve. And then as more of these use cases build up, as more of these patterns start to build, I think the industry will move from hype to sort of, solutioning, right? To being comfortable with the technology, understanding what the boundaries are, what are the use cases that we can achieve, applying it to my business, and becoming successful, just like we've done with every other technology that has happened before. Right? We did this with cloud. We went through all these transformations. It's going to happen again with AI. And I think it is as big as cloud infrastructure is. And, it means it's time to start diving in, giving things a try, understanding the use cases, and looking for ways to actually impact your business.
Get in the train. Hey, man, in the future is going to be, we've got an AI for that. We got an app for that. We got an AI for that.
That's right.
The other thing as well that, some of the interesting user cases that we're seeing as well, in security, in surveillance, in monitoring, for example, you drop a security camera with facial recognitions in your office or your home. It could identify who's supposed to be the home, who's not supposed to be the home. So that person's a little shady. It might not work during Halloween. I want to let you know that. But in general, there's a lot of those things happening. And also even in voice, the call center industry sucking a lot of communications from people, and understanding their problems and who is best within the call center to deal with those types of problems, so you don't go through voice hell, right? As pretty much every human has probably digested that. And AI, of course, is playing a monster role in cybersecurity, in trying to stay one step ahead. I'm going to wrap this up by talking about, I don't want to go to the bad side of AI with robotics killing humans and, Terminator stuff going there. I'll leave that for, the smarter folks. But, there are some, there are things happening right now that AI is doing to harm humans. We don't have to wait until the Terminator comes around the corner, right? The bad actors are leveraging AI to better social engineer us and fish us to click on stuff, right? There are AIs being used for other nefarious reasons and so on. What's your take on the, the as Elon Musk says, the 20% bad AI? Are you seeing that happening in your community of customers?
So I would say it's early days there. Like there's certainly a lot of generating mass amounts of content that could perhaps sway the thinking of a populace, right, is certainly a bad actor type behavior. I would also say for every one of these use cases, there's generally a flip side of the coin where you can use the very technology that they're exploiting to do bad things to detect those bad things and prevent them, right? And so we talked earlier about fraud detection, right? And you can actually generate massive amounts of fraudulent documents. Great. I can then go and train a model to say, this is what fraudulent documents look like. And now I have a greater data corpus. And so I can go back and identify them more easily. So it's two sides of the coin, right? And I would say the industry just needs to continue to drive itself forward in a thoughtful way. And, when these use cases emerge, stay ahead of them, make sure that you have methods to, prevent them and or respond quickly. Security, the classic thing is, look, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and what is your, response to those circumstances and situations, right? If you have a breach, can you contain that breach? Do you have forensic systems in place? It's the same notion with any piece of technology, is understanding how bad actors can exploit and then doing what you can to prevent and respond quickly. So that's why I always try to steer people when they're talking about AI back to sort of a ground truth of it's just another piece of technology, right?
Yeah.
Just like cloud. When you thought about cloud, everyone said, oh my gosh, all my data is up in the cloud. I'm terrified someone could get my data. Okay, fair. And the cloud providers now have incredibly secure systems with fine-grained access controls, with far more money to spend on keeping their data center secure than you probably have. It's a new world, right? And it's just another piece of technology. Stay ahead of it, monitor it, look for these use cases.
But Jonathan, a tiny little pushback. I don't think AI is just another piece of technology. It's like another next level thingy that we don't even understand what the hell that thing does.
Yeah.
I mean, for all the smart people that I talk to about, AI and what they're doing, and they always have a little caveat at the end that says, man, I'm not even sure where this is going, right? Because I didn't expect this and that and the other. So it's another technology in the general sense of the word, but you got to really approach this one with
extra care and caution.
Yeah.
I would say the scope of it is big, right?
Yeah.
I shared earlier, I think this is actually as big, if not bigger, than cloud itself. And this means we're going to be having these conversations for a long time. I look forward to
decades.
In 5 years, you and I sitting down and having the same conversation I'll have a much grayer beard. And it'll be a whole new category. So I think I agree with you that it isn't necessarily just another new piece of technology. I mean, it is, and the scope and size of the impact is so broad, and there's a lot of unknown still.
Yeah.
That I do think, we have to take extra care. This is absolutely the appropriate time to do that.
And for the regular humans out there, the mere mortals, right? I mean, just don't believe everything that's coming through, right? Your emails, watch it, even though it sounds great, the telephone call you receive, sounds like, your friend or someone. It might not be, that video you watched might not be. And so, I don't know, it's like a dose of skepticism is sort of required, but not like just don't believe anything, because what life is that as well, right? But put a little dose of skepticism in what we're dealing with here, because it could be great and it could be not so great depending on what your circumstances. But it is here, man, and one way or another, good, bad, or ugly, we got to deal with this stuff.
Yep.
And the best is education, right? What you're doing today and in talking about the user cases and your opinion and what it is. This is the first step, right? Learning, understanding, getting educated, right? Pass on
Absolutely.
the education, make sure that we're all educated about it, because if we're up to speed, right, at least we understand how to deal with something like this. And
Yeah.
I just feel like we're moving into this phase, right, where we don't want to believe anything anymore, but I don't want to live in that world either, right? So you just gotta, you gotta be a little smarter, I think, now to keep ahead of the curve.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, getting down to those brass tacks, like we talked about, looking at real use cases. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, that's the education that we need. Cut
Yeah.
through the hype, get to the reality, because then you can respond more carefully and thoughtfully to that
Yeah.
reality.
This one here, man, we cannot boil the ocean. Boiling the ocean is a very complicated thing. Well, climate change will probably do that for us, but it's very complicated. And but be smart, dig in, and learn how to go to your customers and help them solve problems, like what Jonathan and his team is doing. Jonathan, I'll leave you with the last word, right? What do you want everybody to know about you and your company, and then the website for them to learn more about your team?
Yeah, well, missioncloud.com is the site. I'm a firm believer that anybody who's on the AWS cloud needs a partner. There's just so much to take advantage of, so much exciting stuff going on. Things like Bedrock and SageMaker, if you're interested in getting into AI. And so that's what we do. We partner with our customers to achieve their goals on AWS. And if this conversation has sparked your interest in, like, oh, okay, I see that there are some real use cases here for me to pursue, or something has perked up your ears, definitely that is what we do, right? We help customers with these projects. AWS is eager to win as many AI workloads as possible. So to the extent that you're excited about an AI project, definitely reach out. We're delighted to help.
Good stuff. I'll just end with this. The channel community, they're going to have the same very question asked to them by every single one of their customers. What's her play, man, on AI? Like, what are we doing with this? What do we got? All right. Are we going to use something? What can we use? What can we, whatever. And this is, and also understand that you do not have to become like an expert on AI to deliver these goods. The average number of partners, I believe, that's at the table of the end customers around what, 7 or so.
Yep.
And so you just got to be one of those. So if you've got a concern, an issue, you're not quite sure what to do, your customer's asking, not sure what you can do, reach out to people like Jonathan and invite them to the table, right? And say, hey, here's my customers, here's what's going on, what do you got? They may come back and go, boom, we just did this for a customer just like this.
Yep.
And then it's like, pick back and let's go. So you don't have to go this alone. You don't have to become the best at this. You just got to know who you got to know to bring into the right partners, right, to solve this problem. Almost getting to the degrees of separation with what's the guy, Kevin Bacon? You got to know, you got to know a guy. You got to know somebody who knows how to do this. And you guys are certainly doing some great stuff with the user cases. Jonathan, pleasure. Keep us posted, man. And we'll certainly be in touch again and talking again about AI, the next revolution, what's going on.
Sounds good, Julian. Great to catch up.